My stepmom didn't let me say goodbye to my dad at his funeral. A week later, she and her kids tried to keep me out of the will reading. She smirked and said, "Only the heirs named in the will can be here." I didn't argue, I just handed her lawyer a folder. When he opened it, my stepmom's face went pale. What if everything you thought you knew about your family, about justice, about the people you loved, was a meticulously crafted lie? What if the woman who married your father wasn't just a gold digger, but something far more sinister, and the only way to expose her meant uncovering a truth that would shatter your world? Just last month, at 28 years old, I stood silently, a ghost at the funeral of my own father, Arthur. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and Brenda's cloying perfume, a stark contrast to the grief suffocating me. He had been my anchor since Mom passed when I was just 15, leaving us against the world, and now, Brenda was determined to cut even that last thread. She'd already barred me from his final goodbye, and later, at the will reading, with a smug, sickening smirk, she declared, "This meeting is only for heirs named in the will." Oh, but she had no idea what I was carrying in my bag that day. And when the lawyer opened my file, Brenda turned a ghostly, chilling pale. If you've ever battled toxic family members trying to snatch what's rightfully yours, then you know this isn't just a story about money. It's about fighting for justice, for truth, for the memory of someone you loved. My father, Arthur Mitchell, was truly my anchor. After my mom lost her battle with breast cancer when I was just 15, it was literally just him and me against the world. He was this incredible real estate developer in Boston, built his company from the ground up, pure grit and vision. He worked so hard, but he always made time for me. Our Sunday mornings were sacred, sailing his little boat in Boston Harbor when the weather would let us, then brunch at Harborview Cafe. We'd just talk for hours. He listened to my endless teenage dramas with the patience of a saint, offering these nuggets of wisdom that just got more precious the older I got. "Clara," he'd always say, "always trust your gut. Your mother had the best instincts of anyone I ever knew, and you, my dear, inherited that from her." Then, when I was 19, a sophomore in college, Dad met Brenda Winters at a charity fundraiser. She was undeniably attractive, incredibly charming, and she seemed so genuinely into him. I was happy, truly. After 4 agonizing years of grieving Mom, he deserved some happiness, some joy. But Brenda, she came with baggage. 2 kids, Kyle, who was 17, and Chloe, 15. And from that very first meeting, something just felt off. They'd smile too wide, laugh too loud at Dad's jokes, and their eyes, they just lingered a little too long on the expensive art, the antique furniture in our home. Still, I tried. God, I really tried. I took Chloe for coffee, tried to connect with Kyle about his college dreams. Dad was falling hard for Brenda, and I desperately wanted to support his happiness. "They just need time to warm up, Clara," Dad would assure me, sensing the icy reception I was getting. They lost their father, too, you know. Though, not lost exactly. He'd abandoned them, which, in some ways, felt even worse. The wedding happened fast, almost alarmingly so, just 6 months after they met. I stood beside Dad, his best woman, forcing a smile as Brenda recited vows about honesty and devotion. They rang so utterly hollow to my ears. And just as I'd suspected, changes swept through our family home immediately after they moved in. Photos of my mother, pictures that had always held places of honor, started to disappear, replaced by Brenda's glossy portraits with her children. Our cherished family heirlooms were rearranged, shunted into storage to make way for Brenda's modern tastes. The sacred Sunday brunches dwindled. First, Brenda would subtly create convenient conflicts. "Oh, Arthur, darling, did you forget the Hendersons are coming over today?" Or, "Kyle has a game, and we simply must support him as a family." When Dad and I did manage to carve out some father-daughter time, Brenda would call, repeatedly, with these manufactured emergencies. Once, she called 8 times, frantic because she couldn't find the spare key to the vacation house, only for Dad to return home and find it exactly where it always was. It was psychological warfare, quiet but relentless. Meanwhile, Kyle and Chloe treated my father's home and his hard-earned money like their absolute birthright. Kyle wrecked 2 cars in his first year with a license, and Dad, bless his heart, replaced them without a single complaint. Chloe maxed out credit cards on shopping sprees, and Dad quietly, stoically, paid the bills. I, on the other hand, chose a completely different path. Even though Dad offered to pay for my entire education and all my living expenses, I insisted on working my way through college. I took out modest student loans, worked part-time jobs. Not because I didn't appreciate his immense generosity, but because I fiercely valued my independence. "You are so stubborn, Clara," Dad would say, a proud smile crinkling his eyes, "just like your mother." She never wanted handouts either. After graduating with my marketing degree, I took a job with a tech company in Seattle. The distance hurt, an ache in my heart, but we kept our bond strong with daily phone calls and monthly visits. He was still my person. During those visits, though, I started to notice subtle, disturbing changes in Dad. He seemed perpetually tired, less vibrant, a little dimmer than his usual brilliant self. When I'd voice my concern, Brenda would instantly interject, her voice sugary but sharp. "He's fine, Clara. Stop being so dramatic. Men his age just slow down a bit." Over the past year, his health declined rapidly. He developed heart problems, and his once robust frame grew alarmingly thin. On my visits, I couldn't help but notice his medications seemed to change constantly, and he often appeared disoriented, a little lost. Then, 3 months before everything fell apart, during my last visit, Dad asked Brenda to give us some privacy. She left the room, reluctantly, her eyes narrowed. The moment the door clicked shut, he gripped my hand, a surprising, almost desperate strength in his touch. "Clara," he whispered, his eyes darting nervously toward the door, "I need to tell you something important. I've been making changes, setting things right. If anything happens to me, talk to Sarah Jenkins at the office. She has something for you." Brenda returned before he could elaborate, a glass of water and a handful of pills in her hand. "Time for your medicine, Arthur," she cooed sweetly, but her eyes, when they flicked to me, were utterly cold, like chips of ice. That was the last real conversation I ever had with my father. I kept calling daily, just like always, but more and more, Brenda would answer, claiming he was resting or unable to come to the phone. When I did manage to speak with him, his voice sounded foggy, his words slurred and indistinct. I was already planning to fly back to Boston the following month, determined to check on him in person, but I never got the chance. The call came on a Tuesday night. I was working late, elbow deep in a marketing campaign, when my phone screen lit up with Kyle's number. This was highly unusual. My stepbrother rarely, if ever, contacted me directly. "Your dad is in the hospital," he said, without even a hello. "Mom told me to call you." My heart plunged into my stomach. "What happened? Is he okay?" I gasped. "I don't know the details. Mom just said to tell you he's in Boston General." And then he hung up, before I could ask anything else. Just hung up. I immediately booked the first flight to Boston, a red-eye leaving in 3 hours. I packed haphazardly, my mind a swirling maelstrom of worst-case scenarios. The 5-hour flight felt like an eternity, each minute a tick of a doomsday clock, my anxiety climbing to unbearable heights. When I finally burst into Boston General at 7 a.m., I rushed to the information desk, breathless. "Arthur Mitchell," I stammered. "He was admitted yesterday." "I'm his daughter." The receptionist directed me to the cardiac care unit on the 4th floor. As the elevator doors hissed open, I saw them, Brenda and her children, Kyle and Chloe, in the waiting area. Brenda, impeccably dressed as always, not a single hair out of place, despite the supposed life-or-death emergency. It was unsettling how calm, how composed she looked. "Brenda, how is he? What happened?" I demanded, my voice raw with fear as I rushed towards them. She stood, instantly, positioning her body like a shield between me and the hallway leading to Dad's room. "Clara, darling, you didn't need to come all this way." Her tone was saccharine, but her eyes were cold. "Of course I did. I cried. He's my father. I need to see him." Brenda's expression hardened. "The doctors are allowing only immediate family at this time." Arthur needs his rest, not emotional scenes. It felt like a physical slap across the face. I am his immediate family. I am his daughter, I retorted, my voice rising. The doctors were very specific, she insisted, her voice dripping with the fakest sympathy I'd ever heard. Family only right now. We'll call you if there are any changes. Behind her, Chloe smirked, a cruel glint in her eyes, while Kyle, at least, had the decency to look deeply uncomfortable. Frantic, I went directly to the nurse's station, explaining that I was Arthur Mitchell's daughter and needed to see him. The charge nurse looked utterly confused. The patient's wife indicated his only children were already here, she said, glancing towards Brenda. That's his wife, I clarified, my frustration boiling over, but I am his daughter from his first marriage. Please, I begged, I just need to see my dad. The nurse looked completely torn, clearly caught in a family dispute she wanted absolutely no part of. Let me speak with Mrs. Mitchell and the doctor, she finally conceded. I waited for hours. Hours stretched into an eternity. Brenda and her children were allowed in and out of Dad's room, a cruel parade, while I remained banished to the sterile waiting area. Eventually, a doctor, kind-faced but weary, approached me. Miss Mitchell, he began, I understand there's some confusion about visitation. I quickly explained the whole agonizing situation, and he nodded sympathetically. Your father is heavily sedated right now. His condition is serious, but stable. We're monitoring his cardiac function. I will allow you a brief visit, though he likely won't be conscious. A wave of overwhelming relief washed over me, but it was tragically short-lived. As the doctor began to lead me towards Dad's room, Brenda suddenly emerged, pulling him aside for a hushed, intense conversation. When he returned, his entire demeanor had shifted. I apologize, he said, his voice now stiff, but Mrs. Mitchell has informed me that your father explicitly stated he did not want visits from anyone outside his household during this hospitalization. As his medical proxy, we must respect her decisions regarding visitors. I couldn't believe my ears. It was a lie, a cruel, impossible lie. That is not true. I cried. My father would never say that. Please, just 5 minutes. The doctor apologized again, his expression now unyielding. When I refused to leave the floor, desperate to get to my dad, hospital security was called. Humiliated, heartbroken, and utterly desperate, I was escorted to the lobby like a criminal. For the next 3 agonizing days, I tried everything. I came back during different shifts, hoping to find a more sympathetic nurse, someone who might understand. I even staked out the parking garage, hoping to intercept a doctor. I called the hospital administration, pleaded with anyone who would listen. But nothing worked. Brenda had locked down access completely, an iron curtain of her making. Then, on the 4th day, a nurse named Rachel approached me in the hospital cafeteria. You're Arthur Mitchell's daughter, right? She asked quietly, sliding into the seat across from me. Yes, I responded, my voice trembling with hope. Have you been caring for him? How's he doing? She glanced around nervously before speaking. I really shouldn't be talking to you, but something just doesn't feel right about this whole situation. Your father, he's been asking for you. My heart, a stone for days, suddenly soared. He's conscious. Brenda told everyone he was in a coma. Rachel shook her head. He has periods of consciousness. He's weak, but lucid at times. He specifically asked about his daughter, Clara, yesterday. Tears, hot and uncontrollable, streamed down my face. Can you help me see him? I begged. I'll try, she whispered. I'm working tomorrow night. Come at 11 p.m., when visitation hours are over and the floor is quieter. I can't promise anything, but I'll try to get you in briefly. That night, I barely slept, clinging to the fragile thread of hope that I would finally see Dad. But at 6 a.m., my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Miss Mitchell, this is Dr. Kaplan from Boston General. I'm very sorry to inform you that your father passed away about an hour ago. The world, it just stopped. Shuddered. What? I screamed, no, that can't be right. He was stable. The nurse said he was stable. He suffered a massive cardiac arrest in the early hours, the doctor explained, his voice gentle but firm. We attempted resuscitation, but we were unsuccessful. I am truly sorry for your loss. I never got to say goodbye. I never got to tell him I loved him one last time. Brenda, she had ensured it would be that way. She had stolen his last breath from me. The funeral arrangements were, predictably, completely controlled by Brenda. The service was scheduled at some impersonal, upscale funeral home, not the small, humble chapel where my mother's service had been held, the place Dad had always said he wanted his own. When I arrived, an usher, with a carefully neutral face, directed me to a seat in the very back, miles away from the family section where Brenda, Kyle, and Chloe sat in the front row, a perfect picture of grief. I watched, a phantom, as person after person approached them with condolences, many of them casting confused, pitying glances back at me. A few of Dad's oldest friends, true to their unwavering loyalty, made a point of coming to sit with me or simply squeeze my shoulder in silent, powerful support. It meant the world. During the eulogy, Brenda painted herself as the ever-devoted wife, the tireless nurse who had lovingly cared for my father through his final illness. She spoke of their blended family, never once acknowledging my existence, let alone my name. When it came time to view the body, Brenda's brother, a hulking presence, physically stepped in front of me. Family first, he stated coldly, his eyes as blank as stones. By the time I was finally allowed to approach, they were already closing the casket. My last glimpse of my father was partial, obscured, and rushed. It ripped a hole in my soul. At the reception afterward, a sterile, joyless affair, I overheard Brenda speaking with a man I recognized as her lawyer, Richard Stone. "We'll proceed with the reading on Tuesday," he said. "I have all the paperwork in order." "Good," Brenda replied, her voice laced with a chilling smugness. Arthur was very specific about his wishes. "Everything is settled exactly as it should be." The sheer, brazen satisfaction in her tone made my stomach churn, ball rising in my throat. She thought she had won. I left the reception early, the suffocating grief and anger too much to bear. I drove back to my hotel through a blur of tears, feeling a loneliness so profound it echoed in my bones. I had never felt so utterly defeated. Dad was gone and Brenda had won. She had successfully cut me out of his final days, his last moments, and she was clearly, sickeningly confident about what would happen next. That night, I sobbed until my eyes were dry, until no more tears would come. I had lost not only my father, but my last tangible connection to the family I had once known, the family Brenda had systematically dismantled. Little did I know Dad, my brilliant, foresightful father, had anticipated Brenda's every move. And he had set in motion a plan that would change everything. 3 days after the funeral, I was still holed up at the Hampton Inn near my childhood home. I couldn't bring myself to go back to Seattle, to the life I'd built away from all this pain. I'd taken bereavement leave from work, but beyond that, I had no plan, no direction. The hollowness inside me made it almost impossible to think past each agonizing hour. A knock on my hotel room door startled me, making me jump. I wasn't expecting anyone, and Brenda's shadowy allies had made it abundantly clear I wasn't welcome to linger in Boston. When I opened the door, I found Sarah Jenkins, my father's executive assistant of 15 years, standing there, looking incredibly nervous. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" I asked, bewildered. She glanced quickly down the hallway, her eyes darting around. "May I come in, Clara?" "I shouldn't be seen here." I stepped aside, letting her enter, confusion momentarily displacing the crushing weight of my grief. Sarah had always been kind to me, but we weren't what you'd call close. Once inside, she reached into her large purse and pulled out a package. It was a manila envelope, sealed with a deep red wax, bearing the unmistakable imprint of my father's signet ring, the one that had belonged to his grandfather. "Your father gave me this 6 months ago," Sarah explained, her voice barely above a whisper as she handed me the package. "He made me promise to deliver it to you personally if anything happened to him. He was very specific that it shouldn't be sent by mail or messenger and that no one else should know about it." My hands trembled violently as I took the envelope, the weight of it suddenly immense. Did he say what it was? I whispered, my throat tight. Sarah shook her head. Only that it was important, and that you would understand what to do. She checked her watch nervously. I should go. Brenda has been at the office daily since your father died, going through his files. She even fired 2 people yesterday. Her words hung heavy in the air. After Sarah left, I just stared at that package, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I was terrified of what it might contain, yet so desperately, achingly eager to connect with Dad just one last time. Finally, I broke the wax seal, the crimson flakes crumbling under my shaky fingers, and opened the envelope. Inside were 3 distinct items: a handwritten letter penned on my father's familiar personal stationery, a legal document in a separate, sealed envelope, marked with the logo of Harrington and Associates, definitely not his usual law firm, and a small, unassuming key taped to a card with an address and box number for the First National Bank. With hands that still wouldn't stop shaking, I unfolded my father's letter. My dearest Clara, it began, in his distinct, firm handwriting. If you are reading this, then my worst fears have come to pass. I am so profoundly sorry for the pain you must be feeling, and even more so that I will not be there to comfort you. I have made a terrible, grievous mistake in trusting Brenda. Over the past year, I've noticed a disturbing pattern in her behavior. Items disappearing, documents being moved, medications making me feel worse, not better. My oldest, dearest friends suddenly unwelcome in my own home. At first, I tried to dismiss these concerns as paranoia, the ramblings of an old man. But then I found undeniable evidence that Brenda has been in regular contact with her ex-husband, the very man she swore abandoned her. The reality, as I painfully discovered, is quite different. 6 months ago, I quietly updated my will with a new, independent law firm. Brenda knows nothing of this. The enclosed document is a copy of this new will. The original, My True Wishes, is registered with the state. I had planned to confront Brenda once I had gathered sufficient, irrefutable evidence. But my health, it has deteriorated far more rapidly than I ever expected. I fear my time is running desperately short. Remember that I love you, Clara. You have been the greatest joy of my life, my beacon. I would be so incredibly proud of the woman you have become. All my love, Dad. Tears streamed down my face, blurring his careful script. It was a torrent of grief for his loss, but also a fierce, burning wave of vindication. Dad had known. He had seen through Brenda's meticulously crafted facade, and he had taken definitive steps to protect me, to protect his legacy. The sealed legal document, untouched by my trembling hands, was indeed a will, dated just 6 months earlier, and notarized by witnesses I didn't recognize. I didn't break its seal, understanding the importance of keeping it officially intact. The next morning, a new kind of resolve fueling me, I went to the First National Bank. After verifying my identity and the key, the bank manager, a polite but curious man, escorted me to the vault, leaving me alone with the safety deposit box. Inside, I found a trove of chilling evidence. First, another letter from Dad, meticulously explaining each piece. Then, a stack of photographs, taken by a private investigator, showing Brenda meeting clandestinely with a man Dad identified as her supposedly estranged ex-husband, Daniel Evans. More photos showed the same man brazenly visiting my father's house when Dad was away on business trips. But what truly curdled my blood were the financial records, a labyrinth of unusual transfers from my father's personal accounts to offshore accounts linked to Brenda's brother. It was all there, damning and undeniable. And there was more. Copies of my father's medical records, filled with his own shaky, handwritten notes, questioning changes to his prescriptions that suspiciously coincided with Brenda's trips to the pharmacy. A tiny thumb drive contained audio recordings from my father's home office, capturing conversations between Brenda and her children, Kyle and Chloe, callously discussing how they would spend their inheritance once the old man is gone. In one particularly chilling recording, Brenda instructed Kyle to make sure Dad took all his medication while she was away for the weekend. Make sure he takes the blue pills first, she'd said, her voice devoid of warmth. They make him sleepy so he won't fuss about the others. The final document was a meticulously handwritten timeline my father himself had created, tracking his health decline against Brenda's actions. He noted increasing fatigue and confusion, often after Brenda insisted on preparing his meals and managing his medication. As I reviewed everything, a horrifying, sickening picture emerged. My father hadn't just been taken advantage of financially. He had been systematically isolated, poisoned, and, I now realized, possibly medically abused. The question that gnawed at me, that echoed like a scream in my head, was whether Brenda had merely exploited his illness, or had she, in cold blood, actually accelerated his decline? With trembling hands, I repacked the irrefutable evidence into my bag. Dad had provided me with everything I needed to challenge Brenda, to bring her entire house of lies crashing down. Now, I just needed to find the right, devastating moment to use it. The day of the will reading arrived. Of course, I hadn't been officially notified. Brenda had seen to that. But Dad's old, loyal friend, David Miller, who had been my father's attorney for decades before Brenda inexplicably fired him just 3 months prior, had tipped me off about the time and location. Something stinks about this whole situation, Clara, David had told me, his face grim, over coffee the previous day. Arthur would never have cut you out of his final arrangements. And switching attorneys after 30 years of friendship? It doesn't add up. I arrived at the polished, intimidating offices of Stone and Powell precisely at 2 p.m. The receptionist looked genuinely startled when I gave my name. Miss Mitchell, you are not on the list for this meeting, she said, her eyes widening after checking her computer. I am Arthur Mitchell's daughter, I stated, my voice steady despite the furious pounding of my heart. I should be at the reading of his will. She made a hushed, furtive phone call, then, reluctantly, directed me to wait. A few minutes later, Richard Stone himself, impeccably tailored, emerged from the conference room. Miss Mitchell, he began, a strained smile on his face. This is somewhat awkward, but the reading has already begun. Mrs. Mitchell indicated you were aware you are not included in the proceedings. I held my ground, my spine rigid. As Mr. Mitchell's daughter, I have a right to be present, regardless of the contents of the will. Stone looked visibly uncomfortable, but he nodded reluctantly. Very well. Please follow me. The moment I stepped into that hushed, tension-filled conference room, Brenda's face went through a rapid, terrifying spectrum of emotions, shock, then raw anger, settling into a cold, composed smugness. Kyle and Chloe sat on either side of her, along with Brenda's brother and her personal assistant, all forming a united front. What is she doing here? Brenda demanded, her voice sharp, not even deigning to look at me directly. As Mr. Mitchell's daughter, Miss Mitchell has requested to be present, Stone explained, his voice even. Brenda let out a theatrical sigh, a performance for the ages. This meeting is only for heirs named in the will, which Clara is not. Arthur was very clear about his wishes. The calm, sickening certainty in her voice made my blood boil, a furious inferno inside me, but I maintained my composure. I hadn't come this far, armed with Dad's truth, to lose control now. I understand you are grieving, Brenda, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the earthquake of emotions raging within me, but I have a right to hear my father's wishes directly, even if he chose to disinherit me. Richard Stone visibly relaxed at my outwardly reasonable tone. Perhaps we can proceed, he murmured. As I was saying, the will dated January 15th of this year stipulates that the entirety of Arthur Mitchell's estate, with the exception of specific personal items listed in Appendix A, is to be transferred to his wife, Brenda Mitchell, with secondary beneficiaries being her children, Kyle and Chloe Winters. Brenda shot me a triumphant, gloating look, a smirk twisting her lips. I met it with a small, knowing smile of my own, one that seemed to unsettle her slightly. Stone continued, droning through the document, detailing the extensive assets my father had painstakingly accumulated. The family home, valued at a staggering $2,800,000. His company shares worth approximately $12 million, investment portfolios, vacation properties, and various priceless personal collections of art and antiques. When he finished, Brenda placed a dramatic hand over her heart, a performance for the ages. "Arthur always took care of us," she simpered. "He knew what was best for the family." "Are there any questions?" Stone asked, scanning the room. And then it was time. I reached into my bag, pulling out the sealed document Sarah had delivered, its presence radiating silent power. "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through the smug silence, "I believe there has been a mistake." All eyes snapped to me as I rose, walked deliberately to Richard Stone's position at the head of the table, and placed the document before him. "What is this?" he asked, frowning, clearly confused by the unfamiliar law firm seal. "This," I stated, my voice ringing with cold certainty, "is my father's most recent will, legally executed and filed with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts 6 months ago." Brenda shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly across the polished floor. "This is ridiculous," she shrieked. "Arthur would have told me if he updated his will." Stone, his brow furrowed, carefully examined the document, breaking the wax seal. He read through the first few pages, and his expression, initially skeptical, shifted rapidly to one of profound concern. "This appears to be a legally executed will," he murmured, his voice laced with shock, "dated more recently than the one we have been discussing. It bears Mr. Mitchell's signature, which I recognize, and proper witness attestations." He looked up at a now ashen-faced Brenda. "Mrs. Mitchell, were you aware of this document?" Brenda's face had completely drained of color. "This is preposterous. It must be a forgery." Richard Stone continued to examine the document, his eyes scanning the precise legal text. "It contains language specifically revoking all prior wills and codicils," he announced, his voice tight. "If this is authentic, it would supersede the will we were just reviewing." "Read it," I said, quietly, but with an unwavering command. Stone cleared his throat, his gaze lingering on Brenda's livid face, and began to read. The new will, it painted a drastically, utterly different picture of my father's true wishes. Brenda and her children were provided for, yes, but only with modest trust funds, designed to provide a reasonable living allowance, but granting them absolutely no control over the principal. The family home, my childhood home, was to be sold, with the proceeds going to establish a charitable foundation in my mother's name. The bulk of the estate, including the controlling interest in Mitchell Development Corporation, was left entirely to me, Clara Mitchell, with specific, heartfelt instructions about continuing my father's legacy of ethical development and charitable giving. But the most damning, chilling clause was near the very end, in the event that my death occurs under circumstances that might be considered suspicious or premature, I direct my executive to authorize a full investigation, including toxicology reports and a review of all my medical treatment in the months preceding my death. The silence in the room was deafening. Brenda's face, already pale, contorted with pure, unadulterated rage. "This is a lie," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "A complete fabrication." She whipped her head towards her children. Tell them your father would never do this to us." Kyle looked utterly stunned, caught in the crossfire, while Chloe, ever the actress, began to cry dramatically, large, performative tears. Richard Stone held up a placating hand. "Mrs. Mitchell, please. This document contains a notary seal and witnesses. It appears to have been properly filed with the state. If you contest it, we will need to proceed through proper legal channels." "Contest it," Brenda roared. "I'll destroy it. Arthur loved me. He would never have done this behind my back." Her carefully maintained composure had completely, spectacularly evaporated. "That ungrateful bitch turned him against me. After everything I did for him." Her brother tried to calm her, but she violently shrugged him off. "Mrs. Mitchell," Stone said firmly, his voice cutting through her tirade. "I must advise you that outbursts of this nature will not help your position if you choose to contest this will. The language here is quite clear, and there are additional sealed instructions regarding potential investigations into Mr. Mitchell's death." At the chilling mention of investigations, Brenda went completely, eerily still. Her eyes started to the door, a flicker of panic, as if calculating an escape route, realizing the true gravity of what was happening. I remained utterly calm, a quiet observer as the scene unfolded, exactly as Dad had predicted. "Brenda," I said, my voice low and steady, "I think we both know Dad saw through you at the end. This is his final message to you." "You know nothing," she hissed, her eyes blazing with fury. "Your father was a confused old man. He didn't know what he was signing." Richard Stone, now visibly uncomfortable, clearly wanting no part of this dramatic meltdown, interjected, "I believe we should adjourn this meeting until we can verify the authenticity of this new document. Though I must note that it appears to be in order, and the firm listed is reputable." "Verify it?" Brenda screamed, grabbing her purse and storming towards the door. "There is nothing to verify. I am his wife. This meeting is over. My attorney will be in touch." She stormed toward the door, pausing only to spit her final, venomous words at me. "This is not over, Clara." Her children scrambled to follow her out, casting a quick, unreadable glance back at me, a flicker of something in his eyes. The room fell into a heavy, echoing silence after their dramatic departure. Richard Stone sighed, a deep, weary sound. "Miss Mitchell, I apologize for the confusion. I had no knowledge of this updated will." "I understand," I said, gathering my own belongings. "My father anticipated Brenda's actions. That's why he took such precautions." As I left the conference room, I felt a strange, profound sense of calm settling over me. Dad had reached out from beyond the grave, his love and foresight a powerful shield. He had protected me and, in doing so, exposed Brenda's true, monstrous nature. The battle, I knew, was far from over, but this was the first, decisive victory. And it felt glorious. The immediate aftermath of that will reading was utter chaos. Brenda, predictably, refused to vacate the family home, defiant and enraged. She changed the security codes, instructed the staff not to admit me under any circumstances. My phone became a battlefield, filled with vitriolic text messages from her, alternating between outright threats and manipulative attempts to gaslight me about my father's mental state when he signed the new will. Her brother, a man I'd never trusted, left chilling, menacing voicemails, suggesting I back off before things get ugly. Unsettled by the sheer intensity of Brenda's reaction, I checked out of the Hampton Inn and moved to a different hotel, using an assumed name. The very next day, I met with Maria Rodriguez, a sharp, formidable attorney specializing in contested wills and estate fraud. "Your father was incredibly clever," Maria said, her eyes gleaming with respect after reviewing the stack of documents. "By creating the new will with an independent firm and filing it with the state, he established an incredibly strong legal position. Brenda can contest it, but she'll need to prove he was not of sound mind when he signed it." "He knew exactly what he was doing," I assured her, my voice firm. "The question is," Maria mused, her expression growing serious, "how far did Brenda actually go? These medical records, they suggest she may have been tampering with his medication." My blood ran cold. "If that's true," Maria continued, her voice grave, "we're talking about potential criminal charges that go far beyond just a will contest. But proving it will be difficult." Together, we meticulously developed a strategy, enforced the will while simultaneously gathering more evidence about Brenda's sinister actions. Meanwhile, Brenda, ever the master manipulator, launched a vicious smear campaign among my father's social circle. She told anyone who would listen that I had manipulated my declining father, taking advantage of his grief over a recent friend's death to convince him to change his will. Clara always resented me. I heard she told the members of Dad's golf club she just couldn't accept that Arthur found happiness again after her mother died. She poisoned him against his new family. The searing irony of her using the word poisoned was, I assure you, not lost on me. A week after the will reading, I returned to my hotel room to find the door slightly ajar. My heart hammered in my chest. I immediately called hotel security before even daring to step inside. The room had been thoroughly searched, items moved, rearranged, a chilling invasion. Most concerning, the copies of Dad's medical records were missing, though, thankfully, I had kept the originals in a separate, secure location. The hotel's security footage showed a man in a maintenance uniform entering my room, but his face was never clearly visible to the camera. The hotel manager was apologetic, but could offer little help beyond changing my room and adding extra security. It was clear, Brenda was getting desperate. That evening, I received a surprising text from Kyle. Need to talk. Not with Mom. Plaza Cafe tomorrow, 10 a.m. I was instantly wary, convinced it was a trap, but my curiosity and a desperate hope for answers pushed me to agree. I chose a public location and arrived early, scanning for any signs of a setup. Kyle arrived alone, looking utterly tired and deeply conflicted, his usual swagger completely gone. I don't know what to believe anymore, he admitted, after ordering a coffee he didn't touch. Mom's falling apart. She's drinking all day, making frantic calls, and burning documents in the backyard. Burning documents? I leaned forward, my voice barely a whisper. What kind of documents? He shrugged, looking lost. I don't know exactly. Financial stuff, I think. She sent Chloe and me away when she realized we were watching. But listen, the thing is, I found some pills in her bathroom. Prescription bottles with your dad's name on them, but the labels were partially torn off. My blood ran absolutely cold. Kyle, do you understand what that might mean? I asked, my voice tight with dread. He nodded miserably. I'm not stupid, Clara. She's my mother. But Arthur was good to us, and if she did something to him. He trailed off, unable to complete the horrific thought. You need to tell the police, I urged, my voice firm. I can't, he whispered, fear flashing across his face. But I won't lie for her either, if it comes to that. As Kyle was leaving, he paused. Chloe wants to talk to you too. She's more confused than I am. Mom has always controlled her, but she really loved Arthur. 2 days later, I met Chloe at a small, anonymous coffee shop across town. Unlike her usual polished, perfect appearance, she looked utterly disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy from crying. Is it true? She demanded, without any preamble. Did Mom really get left out of the real will? Not entirely, I explained softly. Dad set up trusts for all of you. You'll be provided for, just not with the lump sum she expected. Chloe's face crumpled, her carefully constructed facade shattering. She promised me the beach house, she whispered, her voice breaking. Said I could have it after Arthur died. She caught herself, looking horrified at her own words. Chloe, I pressed gently. When did she start making those promises? I don't know, she stammered, twisting a napkin into shreds in her hands. Maybe a year ago. She talked a lot about what we'd do after, but I didn't think she meant. She couldn't finish the thought, couldn't bring herself to voice the horror. I reached for her hand, a gesture of unexpected empathy, but she pulled away. I should go. She'll know I talked to you. Despite my deeply complicated feelings toward my step-siblings, a surprising wave of compassion washed over me. They had been raised by Brenda, shaped and twisted by her toxic values and relentless manipulations. In their own way, they were victims too. The situation escalated dramatically the very next week. Brenda, completely uninvited, appeared at a prestigious charity event my father had supported annually, creating an absolute spectacle. The moment she spotted me, speaking with board members, she shrieked, "There she is," pointing a dramatic finger across the crowded ballroom. The daughter who abandoned her father for years, then swooped in to steal his money. Security eventually escorted her out, but she continued to shout wild accusations until she was out of earshot. The incident, of course, made the local society pages, dragging unwanted, sensational publicity into our already devastating situation. That night, the anonymous threats began. First, a chilling text from an unknown number. Back off or regret it. Then an email arrived with photos of me entering and leaving my new hotel, irrefutable proof that I was being watched, stalked. I reported everything to the police and to Maria, who, with renewed urgency, accelerated our legal proceedings. We learned that Brenda had hired a notorious probate attorney, infamous for aggressive tactics, for dragging out estate cases for years. "She's playing for time," Maria explained, her jaw tight, trying to force a settlement by making the process so unpleasant and expensive that you'll simply give up. But Brenda had severely underestimated both my unwavering determination and my father's incredible foresight. While meticulously reviewing my father's personal papers, I discovered another chilling detail: notes about Brenda's previous marriage. Dad, in his quiet, methodical way, had hired investigators who uncovered something truly shocking. Brenda had been married twice before, not just once, as she had always claimed. Her very first husband, a wealthy older man, had died suddenly of heart failure after just 3 years of marriage. Brenda had inherited everything, leaving his children from a previous marriage with absolutely nothing. The circumstances were disturbingly, sickeningly similar to my father's situation. Even more damning, Maria's investigator discovered that Brenda's supposedly estranged ex-husband, Daniel Evans, the father of Kyle and Chloe, had never actually divorced her. They had staged a fake separation, maintaining a secret relationship all this time, a fact now irrefutably documented in the surveillance photos Dad had left in that safety deposit box. The web of deception was far more extensive, far more sinister than even my father had realized. Brenda wasn't just a gold digger. She was a practiced con artist, a black widow with a chilling pattern of targeting wealthy older men. The question that kept me awake at night, that gnawed at my very soul, was whether she had simply waited for my father to die naturally, or had she, in her cold, calculating way, actively helped the process along. The police finally became directly involved when Brenda, in a fit of uncontrollable rage, violated the temporary restraining order I had obtained against her. She appeared, unhinged, at a restaurant where I was dining with Sarah Jenkins, screaming accusations and attempting to physically confront me before being restrained by utterly bewildered staff. The responding officers took statements and, upon learning of the existing order, took the matter very seriously. As they escorted Brenda out, her wild, thrashing figure a picture of fury, I overheard one officer comment to his partner that she smelled like a pharmacy. The pieces were falling into place, a horrifying mosaic of truth. But Brenda, cornered and desperate, still had one last, desperate move left to play. The court date for the preliminary hearing on the contested will arrive a tense 3 weeks after the chaotic will reading. The courtroom was thick with unspoken tension as Maria and I faced Brenda and her attorney, Martin Drake, across the aisle. Kyle sat stiffly behind his mother, his face a mask of conflict, but Chloe was noticeably absent. Judge Evelyn Hayes, a stern woman in her 60s with a formidable reputation for no-nonsense efficiency, reviewed the filings before addressing the court. "Before we proceed," she stated, her voice crisp and authoritative, looking directly at a pale, shaking Brenda, "I want to be unequivocally clear that I have zero tolerance for the kind of behavior described in these reports. Harassment, intimidation, and flagrant violation of court orders will not help your case, Mrs. Mitchell." Brenda's attorney, Martin Drake, a slick, polished man, rose smoothly. "Your Honor, my client denies any harassment. These are simply unfortunate family disagreements blown out of proportion during a time of intense grief." Judge Hayes was utterly unmoved. "Save it for your arguments, counselor. Let's address the competing wills." The proceedings began with Martin Drake presenting his case. The January will was valid, and the later will was either a forgery or signed under undue influence. His arguments were polished, eloquent even, but glaringly light on actual evidence. Then it was Maria's turn. She methodically, systematically, demolished their position. She presented affidavits from the witnesses to the newer will, ironclad confirmation from the notary, and the state filing records, undeniable proof of its legitimacy. But the most damaging blow came from the testimony of David Miller, my father's longtime, loyal attorney. "Arthur called me approximately 7 months ago," David testified, his voice clear and unwavering. He expressed grave concerns about his wife's behavior and asked for recommendations for an independent attorney, as he wished to update his will without Mrs. Mitchell's knowledge. He paused, meeting Brenda's furious, hate-filled glare with a calm, steady gaze. Brenda, who had once hosted him at lavish dinner parties in her home, now looked as if she wanted to lunge across the courtroom. David continued. He was of completely sound mind and explained his reasoning clearly. Arthur told me he had discovered financial improprieties and was deeply concerned about his medical care. He believed Mrs. Mitchell was deliberately isolating him from his daughter and friends. Drake objected, claiming this was hearsay, but Judge Hayes, with a firm hand, allowed the testimony as crucial evidence of my father's state of mind when changing his will. But the most surprising, heart-stopping moment came when Kyle, my stepbrother, asked to address the court. Brenda hissed at him to sit down, her eyes flashing murderous intent, but he ignored her, walking with a newfound resolve to the witness stand. Under oath, Kyle, his voice shaking but firm, described finding those prescription bottles hidden amongst Brenda's personal effects. He recounted overhearing chilling arguments between Brenda and her ex-husband, Daniel, discussing speeding things up. And he confessed to witnessing Brenda actively preventing me from seeing my father in the hospital. Arthur was good to us, Kyle concluded, his voice breaking, tears welling in his eyes. He didn't deserve what happened to him and Clara. Clara doesn't deserve what my mother is doing to her now. Brenda's face was a mask of pure, unbridled fury. When Drake eventually called her to testify, she had somehow composed herself, slipping back into her practiced role of the grieving, wronged widow. She spoke with theatrical sorrow about my father's declining mental state, my alleged abandonment when I moved to Seattle, and the happy blended family that had been tragically destroyed by my jealousy and greed. It was a convincing performance, expertly delivered. But it began to crumble, violently, under Maria's relentless, precise cross-examination. Using the meticulous timeline my father had created, a timeline Brenda had no idea existed, Maria walked her through specific dates and events, exposing multiple, glaring contradictions. Mrs. Mitchell, Maria's voice was like steel. Can you explain why you told the court you were with your husband continuously during his final days? Yet credit card records show you dining at Chez Maurice with a Mr. Daniel Evans on the evening before Mr. Mitchell's death? Brenda stammered, visibly thrown. That was a brief business meeting. Daniel is my ex-husband. We were discussing the children. The same ex-husband you claimed abandoned you and your children? Maria pressed, her voice unwavering. The man you told Arthur Mitchell you never wanted to see again? That is not relevant to this proceeding. Drake interjected, leaping to his feet. Maria turned calmly to Judge Hayes. Your Honor, it speaks directly to Mrs. Mitchell's credibility and her established pattern of deception. The judge agreed, and Maria continued her methodical, devastating dismantling of Brenda's testimony. By the time she finished, Brenda was visibly shaken, her carefully constructed, fragile facade cracking and shattering before everyone's eyes. When all arguments concluded, Judge Hayes took only a brief recess, a tense, silent eternity, before returning with her decision. Based on the compelling evidence presented, she began, her voice resonating through the courtroom. I find the will dated July 15th to be valid and enforceable. The earlier will is hereby declared revoked. Mrs. Mitchell is removed as executive of the estate, and Ms. Clara Mitchell is appointed in her place as specified in the valid will. Brenda gasped audibly, a choked sound, while a wave of immense, cleansing relief washed over me, almost knocking me off my feet. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, she continued, her gaze unwavering as it settled on Brenda, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential elder abuse, fraud, and misconduct. Mrs. Mitchell is ordered to vacate the family residence within 48 hours and to turn over all financial records related to Mr. Mitchell's accounts. As we left the courtroom, Detective Ben Carter from the Boston Police Department approached us, his expression grim. Miss Mitchell, he said, looking directly at me, I would like to speak with you about your father's medical records. Over the next several weeks, the full, horrifying extent of Brenda's deception unraveled completely. The police investigation revealed that Brenda had never legally divorced her second husband, Daniel Evans, making her marriage to my father potentially invalid, a complete sham. More disturbingly, toxicology tests, ordered on preserved samples of my father's blood from the hospital, showed dangerously elevated levels of digoxin, a heart medication he had not been prescribed. Brenda's carefully constructed house of cards collapsed completely when Chloe, in a moment of remorse, or perhaps self-preservation, turned over a hidden journal. In it, she had meticulously tracked my father's medication, noting which combinations made him most compliant, most forgetful. Criminal charges were swiftly filed against Brenda for fraud, elder abuse, and as an accessory to involuntary manslaughter. Daniel Evans was also charged as a co-conspirator. While the agonizing legal process would undoubtedly take months, even years, to fully resolve, Brenda's reign of terror was effectively over. The media coverage was intense, sensational, and deeply painful. Headlines screamed "Black Widow strikes again" and "Daughter's detective work unveils deadly plot," turning our profound family tragedy into lurid public entertainment. I declined all interview requests, refusing to sensationalize my father's memory, choosing instead to focus on honoring his legacy and painstakingly rebuilding what Brenda had so viciously tried to destroy. As I painstakingly sorted through my father's belongings in the family home, now finally emptied of Brenda's oppressive presence, I discovered treasures she had cruelly hidden away. Photos of my mother, pictures that had vanished from display, letters they had written to each other during their courtship, even my childhood art projects, carefully preserved by my doting father. And then, in his study, behind a false panel in his bookshelf that Brenda had apparently never discovered, I found a collection of videos my father had made over the years. Some were from my childhood innocent moments of joy. Others were more recent reflections on his life, his hopes for the future. The most recent was dated just 2 months before his death. "Clara," he said, looking directly into the camera, his face thin but his eyes, incredibly, still so clear. "If you are watching this, then things have gone as I feared they might. I want you to know that I realized my mistake with Brenda, and I have done everything I can to protect you and what we built together." He paused, emotion overcoming him momentarily, a tremor in his voice. "I should have trusted your instincts about her from the beginning. You have your mother's wisdom. I hope you can forgive my foolishness." Tears streamed down my face, hot and cleansing, as I watched. "I forgive you, Dad," I whispered to the screen, my heart breaking and healing all at once. "Remember what matters," he continued, his voice regaining its strength. "Not the money or the properties, but the values we share. Integrity, compassion, perseverance. Those are your true inheritance, Clara, and no one can ever take them from you." In those moments, watching my father's final, profound messages, I felt him with me again. Not just in memory, but in spirit, his presence a warm, comforting embrace. Despite Brenda's best, most venomous efforts, she had failed to destroy the sacred bond between us. In the end, against all odds, love and truth had prevailed. 6 months after that tumultuous courtroom confrontation with Brenda, I finally moved back into my childhood home. The process of reclaiming the space was a bittersweet blend of pain and profound healing. I had initially considered selling it, as specified in the new will, but after careful consideration and consultation with the estate attorneys, I decided against it. Instead, I chose to maintain ownership and convert a significant part of the property into the headquarters for the Elizabeth Mitchell Foundation, named, of course, after my mother. The foundation, generously funded by a significant portion of my inheritance, would focus on supporting cancer research and providing vital resources for children who had tragically lost parents to illness. It felt like the most perfect, most heartfelt way to honor both my parents' legacies. As I wandered through the newly renovated spaces, memories of my childhood, vibrant and precious, mingled with the scent of fresh paint and new furnishings. I had meticulously removed every last trace of Brenda's cold, soulless modern aesthetic, painstakingly restoring the warm, comfortable, inviting style my mother had originally created. It felt like breathing life back into the very walls. Sarah Jenkins, who, thankfully, had continued working for Mitchell Development during the arduous transition, joined me for tea in the sunroom, a space that had always been my mother's favorite, drenched in natural light. "Your father would be so incredibly proud," she said softly, looking around at the transformation, her eyes a little misty. "He was so worried near the end, not just about the money, but about his entire legacy being twisted, corrupted." "Did he ever tell you what first made him suspicious of Brenda?" I asked, my voice hushed. Sarah nodded, a sad smile playing on her lips. "It was something so small, actually. He noticed her removing photos of your mother from his bedside table when she thought he was asleep. When he confronted her, she just claimed she was dusting them. But it started him thinking about all the other insidious changes she had made, about how isolated he had become. We talked for hours that afternoon, slowly, painstakingly, piecing together the puzzle of my father's final year, filling in so many agonizing gaps in my understanding. Sarah shared stories I had never heard, including how my father had secretly maintained contact with many of his oldest friends, defying Brenda's relentless efforts to cut him off. "He never stopped talking about you, Clara," she assured me, her hand reaching for mine. "Every achievement, every call, those were his brightest moments." The legal proceedings against Brenda continued to unfold, a slow march towards justice. She remained in custody, rightfully denied bail due to the sheer severity of the charges and her undeniable flight risk. Kyle, in a courageous act of his own, had agreed to testify against her in exchange for immunity from any accessory charges. Chloe's situation, however, was far more complicated. Psychological evaluations revealed she had been severely manipulated by her mother throughout her entire life, creating an unhealthy, almost suffocating dependence. She was now receiving intensive therapy while staying with her biological father's sister, trying to unravel years of Brenda's insidious influence. Despite their undeniable, painful role in the events surrounding my father's death, I simply could not bring myself to abandon Kyle and Chloe entirely. They, too, in a different, tragic way, had been victims of Brenda's cruel machinations, raised in an environment utterly saturated with deception and corrosive materialism. They deserved a chance at a different life. After much deep reflection and a lot of emotional wrestling, I established college trust funds for both Kyle and Chloe, using a small, carefully chosen portion of my inheritance. The trusts were meticulously structured to encourage education and, crucially, independence, values my father had passionately championed throughout his life. Kyle was already enrolled in community college, quietly, bravely, working to define his own path, a future completely separate from his mother's poisonous influence. The family home, now truly ours again, gradually filled with the cherished items that had been cruelly shunted into storage when Brenda had so callously redecorated. Family heirlooms, imbued with decades of love and memories, returned to their rightful places of honor. My grandmother's majestic antique clock, its steady tick-tock now filling the entrance hall, and the precious collection of intricate sailboat models my father and I had built together over the years, each one a tiny monument to our shared joy. 3 months after moving back in, reclaiming my space, I organized a true memorial service for my father at his favorite sailing club. Unlike the formal, impersonal, and frankly, soulless funeral Brenda had arranged, this gathering was intimate, authentic, and overflowing with genuine love. Dad's oldest friends shared stories that made us laugh until our sides ached and cry until our hearts were raw, celebrating the extraordinary man he truly was, rather than the sanitized, hollow version Brenda had tried to present to the world. Arthur always said that a person's true wealth was measured by the lives they touched, not the assets they accumulated, David Miller said, raising a glass in a heartfelt tribute. By that measure, he was the richest man I ever knew. As I listened to those beautiful, poignant stories, I realized, with a bittersweet ache, how much of my father's life I still had to discover. Each person who spoke revealed new facets of him I had never seen, expanding my understanding of the complex, generous, and endlessly loving man who had raised me, who had shaped me into who I was. The healing process, I quickly learned, was neither quick nor linear. Some days, an overwhelming wave of grief would crash over me without warning, leaving me breathless and lost. Other days, a furious, burning anger would flare, searing through me when I thought about the precious, irreplaceable final moments with my father that Brenda had so cruelly, deliberately stolen from me. The sickening knowledge that she had potentially hastened his death for cold, hard financial gain was a wound that might never, truly, fully heal. Yet, amid all that pain, I found unexpected gifts, moments of grace. The immense adversity had revealed a strength and resilience within me I never knew I possessed. I had discovered powerful allies in the most unlikely of places, and I had learned, finally, to trust my gut, my instincts, just as my father had so wisely advised all those years ago. Most importantly, I had honored my father's final wishes, protecting the invaluable legacy he had worked so tirelessly, so passionately to build. As the seasons gently changed, slowly, deliberately, I established new routines and traditions. Sunday mornings, once sacredly reserved for sailing with Dad, now became my time for deeply fulfilling volunteer work with a children's grief support group, offering comfort I wished I'd had. The holiday season, which I had dreaded facing without him, became an unexpected opportunity to host a warm, inclusive gathering for others who had lost loved ones, a shared space for healing. One crisp spring morning, as I sat in my father's study, reviewing foundation proposals, my gaze fell upon a quote he had framed on his desk, a simple, profound truth. The greatest inheritance a parent can give their children is a few minutes of their time each day. Despite all his immense success and considerable wealth, my father's most valuable gift, his true treasure, had always been his unwavering presence, his undivided attention. That was the legacy I wanted to honor most in my own life going forward. Giving my time, my energy, and my attention generously to the causes and the people who truly mattered. The legal system, with its slow, grinding wheels, eventually delivered its long-awaited verdict on Brenda. She was convicted on multiple, damning counts and sentenced to 20 years in prison. The news, when it came, brought a complex, unexpected mix of emotions. Not the triumphant, roaring satisfaction I might once have envisioned, but a quieter, more profound sense that justice had, indeed, been served, and that my father, finally, could truly rest in peace. I also kept my difficult promise to visit Kyle and Chloe occasionally, meeting them on neutral ground, watching as they painstakingly worked to build lives independent of their mother's deeply toxic influence. These relationships, I knew, would always remain complicated, scarred by the past, but I remembered my father's immense capacity for forgiveness, his boundless empathy, and I tried, every day, to embody that same generous spirit. Looking back on the turbulent, harrowing journey, from that devastating, life-altering phone call about my father's hospitalization, to the hard one, peaceful life I was, finally, building now, I recognized, with a quiet awe, just how much I had grown. How profoundly I had been transformed. The agonizing pain had burned away my naivety, forging me anew, replacing innocence with a deep, battle-tested wisdom. The profound betrayal had taught me, irrevocably, to value authenticity above all else, and to instantly recognize the insidious whispers of manipulation. The crushing loss had deepened my appreciation for genuine connection, for the pure, unvarnished bonds between people. My father's final gift, I understood now, had not simply been the inheritance that Brenda had coveted so desperately, so monstrously. It had been the truth, painful, yes, but utterly necessary, and the invaluable opportunity to reclaim not just his material assets, but his true, uncorrupted legacy of integrity, compassion, and unwavering love. As I stood at my father's grave on the anniversary of his death, the air crisp, the sky a vast, endless blue, I placed a bouquet of white roses, his absolute favorite, beside the headstone. I kept my promise, Dad, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. Your story was told. Your wishes were honored. Your legacy, it continues. The arduous journey through grief and betrayal had taught me a fundamental, liberating truth. Family is not always defined by blood or legal ties alone. Sometimes, often, it is forged in the crucible of shared values, mutual respect, and genuine, unconditional care. My father, in his incredible foresight, had understood this truth at the very end, making provisions not based on outdated, traditional definitions of family, but on the authentic, unbreakable bonds he truly cherished. That profound understanding has become my unwavering guiding principle as I move forward, cautiously but with open eyes. I choose carefully who I allow into my inner circle now, valuing deep character over superficial charm, undeniable substance over deceptive appearance. The financial wealth my father left me provides a welcome security, yes. But it is the hard-won wisdom, the profound resilience gained through our shared ordeal, that proves most valuable in navigating life's intricate, often unpredictable complexities. This journey, from unthinkable betrayal to hard-won peace, changed me forever. It taught me that sometimes the family we choose and the truth we uncover are far more powerful than any blood tie. If you've ever faced a similar battle, or if a toxic family member tried to steal your peace and your inheritance, I want to hear your story. What was the hardest part? How did you fight back? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if it offered you a glimmer of hope or validation, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life narratives. Your support means the world to me. Thank you for listening to my journey from the shadow of betrayal into the light of healing. Remember, sometimes the greatest strength comes from surviving our deepest wounds and from telling our truth.